Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's virtual plant clinic. For those of you who have attended before, I'll just take a couple of minutes to go through some notes for any new attendees before we get started. For those of you who are logging in who haven't joined us before, welcome. We're glad to have you. During this call, David's let me know we'll probably take questions a couple of times. So please feel free to send me any questions you have about your lawn. If questions come up during the class, you can send those in to the Q&A box. If you already know your question, you can go ahead and send it now. That's fine. We take as much Q&A as we can during these lawn care webinars. Um, for anybody who has any technical issues during the class, please feel free to send me a chat. I'm going to open that up now. I will help you as best I can, but do know we are recording this class, so if you have any issues or you need to leave early, you can always access the recording on our YouTube channel. Generally, it's about 24 hours after the class that it's available. You can find it there. So that's about it for me. David, I know lawn care is a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
It is a lot to cover, so thank you for joining us today to talk about lawn care. And I hope you're enjoying this beautiful snowy afternoon. I know this is a little more than I was expecting, but I'm trying to be upbeat and say, hey, at least it's pretty. And I think it'll be melting fairly soon. But yeah, we're going to talk about lawns today. And like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about seeding. We'll discuss some weed control. I'll take a question break, and then we'll go back and finish up talking a little bit about fertilizer. Because everybody has their own specific questions, everybody's kind of their own circumstances, and this is one of these topics that I think is better if we can sort of open this up and get as many questions as possible on it. So I will go ahead and kick this thing off. Don't want to waste any of your valuable time. And here we go. So this is where we're broadcasting from and where we're talking to is Zone 7. We're right here in Northern Virginia. So we're dealing with our own local weather conditions, and we just remind you if you are out of state or something, just some of these dates, times, and things I'm talking about could vary depending on where you're viewing from. But I always like to begin with a quick review of realizing that what most of us are growing in this area are cool season grasses. So we're talking about lawns, when we're talking about turf grass, we're talking about grass that's happy place is right at about 50 to 75 degrees with about 1 inch of water per week. So you might have noticed just 2 days ago, suddenly lawns started greening up. They kind of had this sort of yellowish brown color going through the winter because we were like in that below 50-degree range. Nothing was really actively growing. When temperatures jumped up, and we have a few days here, even going up into the 80s, instantly you see the grass starting to green up and grow. Because this is what happens is it's responding to the environmental cues. The days getting longer, temperatures getting warmer, and we're off to like this early start on the growing season. The problem that we encounter a lot of times when we're trying to grow grass in this region is everything looks beautiful in sort of March, April, May, but at some point when we start going to June, July, August, when we start going some of this 85, 95, 105 degrees, we're pushing this plant way out of its zone of adaptation. So we're growing a cool season grass in a climate that can go from cool and wet to hot and dry, back to cool and dry, and it's all these different fluctuating, varying weather conditions that we encounter that really make growing lawns, turf grass, a challenge in our region. This sort of picture perfect lawn that I used as my background here, that was taken up here in northern Michigan. So in that area, under that climate, these cool season grasses thrive. If you happen to live down here south, where like Sally is right now, she's down here in the southern region where they're growing predominantly warm season grasses. Where we live in this kind of middle region, this transition zone, we can grow warm season or cool season, but either way, we're going to find challenges. And because the warm season grasses go brown, they go dormant in the summer, almost everybody is growing cool season grasses. And then we're just trying to make the best of it that we can through here. So that's kind of setting a little bit our expectations. Another way to look at this is reflected in the growth pattern of the lawn, of the grass ourselves, of it itself. So if I look at this chart and say, hey, we're right here kind of going into this, we're in this mid-March period. Like I said, we were cruising along through winter. We hit that warm weekend, boom, the grass starts greening up. And so as we're moving in through April, May, into probably June, during this period of time where the temperatures are in that 50 to 75-degree range, and if we're getting the rainfall and the moisture like we have been, you just get this ridiculous flush of growth that comes out the grass. This is that time of year, it might be mid-April or something, where you mow the lawn and you go out there 3 days later and you feel like you have to mow it again. It's really kind of hard to keep up with during this spring flush of mostly vegetative growth. As we start to migrate into the summer months, and we're talking about sort of this June, July, August, September, and our temperatures are going up, the stress on your grass also grows up, and we're trying to see not but above ground, the leaf growth starts to taper off, but we also see the root growth starts to taper off. You take this through into the fall time of the year, and during this weather, again, we resume, if we get into that cool, moist environment, that's where we start to get, again, it greens up, it's growing. And what I liked about this graphic that we found is it's showing how the root development also increases. So in the fall of the year, cool temperatures, short days, the plant is storing carbohydrates down the root system. This is a critical time period for establishment. The spring comes along, a lot of this is vegetative growth. And what we're really trying to do is get our lawns prepared so that they can survive and make it through the summer as best as they can. So that's what we're kind of dealing with here in the Virginia, Maryland, DC area, down into the Carolinas. So what most of our lawns are growing is a grass that's called tall fescue. This is the best adapted turf grass to this variety of different conditions and changing conditions. It has a deeper root system, giving a little better drought tolerance, and it's also more heat tolerant than most of the other, or than pretty much any of the other cool season grasses. So it's this adaptability from full sun to part shade to hot to cold to wet to dry that really makes it the most suitable grass in our region. This is a tall fescue growing in a shaded environment. We are really pushing the limits on its shade tolerance in this situation. So tall fescue does best, and this is really true of all of our turf grasses. There are sun-loving plants, but they will tolerate degrees of shade. This is, again, the limits on the tall fescue. If you start getting to heavy, dense shade conditions, which is less than what you see in the picture here, you're just going to have this constant sort of struggle trying to maintain a grass in that environment. Lawns, we need at least 2 or 3 hours of sunlight to maintain that density. If we don't have that 2 or 3 hours of sunlight, then maybe you should be looking at a different use or situation for that garden. So that's what we're faced with, and they said, talk about how we can maintain and keep these lawns looking their best. So as far as seeding goes, a lot of times, and I have customers that really started coming in this past weekend, and it's wonderful to see everybody now that spring feels like it's here and we're coming in. There's a desire to go out and realize, hey, I got bare spots. I want to repair the lawn and get things looking good that's out there. So if you are going to seed your lawn, first of all, seeding in the germination, it's a process, right? It doesn't just instantly happen. The things that I want to point out for you as far as seeding the lawn is, one, we'd like to really have good soil seed contact. So with that in mind, I really recommend or encourage you to go through with a rake. And this doesn't have to be power equipment. It doesn't have to be spotless. But I do like to make sure that we go through and do a bit of a cleanup, raking out the dead grasses there, cleaning up any sticks, any leaves that are there, because I want to make sure that as you seed the lawn, it actually makes it through the canopy of turf and it gets down and actually contacts that soil. Now, grass seed does not want to be buried deep in the ground. Grass seed needs to have sunlight for it to germinate, right? So this can just be lightly scratched into the surface, or I love to go through and sprinkle a little bit of compost onto it, just about an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch deep. So the compost is there, sort of hold the grass seed in place, cover it, keep some moisture there, and enhances our germination. Plus, as that's degrading and breaking down, that's also going to help to build and improve the heavy clay soil that we have. And then we need to keep it moist, right? Because as that moisture is going to sort of break through the seed coat, it's going to initiate enzymes in there that actually start the germination practice and start it growing. The part that I really want to emphasize to you is this germination of that seed is determined by both temperature and moisture. So I was just checking the soil temperature for my zip code here, 22030 at the Fair Oaks location. And our soil temperature today, right now, is between 52 and 53 degrees. All right. And I put in here that the optimum soil temperature for the grass seed is that 60 to 65 degrees. So you can see if I went out and you did your seeding today, and it's a good time to do this, if you went out and did your seeding today, that grass will not sprout. You won't see any growth until our soil temperatures are more consistently staying in the 60s. So as I look at the forecast, the weather forecast, that might be 2 or 3 weeks. A lot of times you're putting grass down now, but it may not start germinating until we get into April kind of thing. And so that's a normal expectation. If you don't see it sprouting right away, don't get anxious about that. Don't drive yourself crazy. Don't call us and drive us crazy. That's sort of what you should be expecting. But that grass seed is there, and as the soil temperatures start to warm up, you'll see that grass growing. I put this website on here, this Greencast Online. That is it's a commercial company, but they have a soil temperature map that allows you to go in. If you go in there, you can enter your zip code and find out what the soil temperatures are in your neighborhood. I've been using this for at least 5 years. I've also talked to some of the company reps. They really have a good service there, and it's free and it's very reliable. Again, your little microclimate, whether you're in the sun, the shade, and all that would vary somewhat, but it's a pretty good guide, a pretty good indication of what's going on in there. A thing I wanted to say, just show you, in terms of seed selection. I was telling you, tall fescue is going to be the seed that almost everybody's going to be using. So one of the things that we've done here at Maryfield Garden Center, get myself reading, is we follow all the test results that are going on at the University of Virginia, University of Maryland, the local land grant universities. They are testing and evaluating literally like over 100 different varieties of tall fescue. And based on those independent evaluations, start recommending the top performers. And then we are working with seed producers out in Oregon to gather a selection of those top performers, and we put them in and package them in for our region. So if you look at Tough Play, it's 95% tall fescue. There's a little bit of Kentucky bluegrass in there to knit it together and make it denser and tighter. But these are all those top performing varieties based on the evaluations that undergo at Virginia Tech. So if you got bald spots, bare spots, need to do some overseeding in there, this is going to be a good choice for most lawn situations. If you happen to be in a shade environment, and I told you that can be really challenging because these grasses prefer sunny environments, but we do have a blend of, it's called hard fescue. This is a slower growing grass. It takes a little more time to get established, but does offer us better shade performance. And again, this is all comprised of these newer top performing varieties, and they're blended in proportions that we specify. So this is something that we work with seed producers to actually blend to our specifications and expectations. So it is a premium grass seed, and if you're going to do this, I suggest you come in. Now, the reality thing of seeding is, as I was telling you, hey, I put grass seed out now. It starts to germinate in April. Everything looks wonderful in May. But as we move into June, and you think back to that little stress chart that's showing, as you move into June time period and the temperatures get higher, now I have little baby grass that might only be 8, 10 weeks old going into the stressful part of summer. And a lot of times that grass starts to fail. It just begins on the weather. So this is why we're always saying that what we prefer to do, or really our recommendation, is the best time for seeding is going to be in September, early October, as we're in that cooler cycle of the weather in here. But if you fell behind on things, you had damages in there, it got crushed under snowcrete, or you're walking on whatever the case may be, let's go ahead and get started on that as soon as possible, give our grass the best chance of survival. Okay. And going back to so that's my little spiel on seeding, and we'll have a chance to talk that in more detail. Now, the meat of what I want to talk with you about today really is weeds, because when things are going right, when we're in sync and we're on the schedule and life is all flowing the way it should be, right? We're doing our seeding, we're doing our establishment in the fall of the year, and we're concentrating on weed control in spring. So this is what's happening right now. A lot of customers are beginning to bring this little weed into the garden and into the plant clinics. If you look around in your landscape or in your lawn, you might see these beginning to pop up right now. This is in the mustard family, this little white flower, which will really be taking off in the next 1 or 2 weeks. You'll see it's coming up everywhere. This is called bittercress, and it's an example of an annual weed. So what happened was the seeds of this actually started to germinate last year, but they're beginning to show up in the lawn now. So bittercress, then this is chickweed, another very common spring, cool weather weed. They all start coming up, and you're wondering, this is henbit or dead nettle is in there. And you're looking at all these weeds saying, where did all these things come from? They were not here 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Well, they grow during the cool season, and then they die out in the heat of summer. So that seed is in the ground, it's in the soil. It started to germinate earlier this year on the cool temperature. And now, like I said, we had the warm weather in spring. And so just on the same similar growth cycle you're on, boom, it starts to show up instantly and over there. So what we would like to do, and this is an example of an annual weed. So that seed was sitting there. Now it's going into the flowering stage, and it's going to die out as we start to move into the summer months. Well, one of our most effective controls is if we can put down a weed preventer and stop this whole cycle from occurring. Now, there are different ways of managing weeds, and really we always want to go with our cultural measures first. I like to look at weeds as opportunists. Where the lawn starts to thin out or lose its density, any place soil becomes exposed in your garden. Where that soil is exposed and there are no competing plants, that's where the weeds are going to fill in and grow. So the first thing we do is we always keep the soil covered, whether it's protected by a layer of mulch, ground cover, or lawn. We just want to try to reduce the opportunities for those weeds to get started. And the other is, if any preventative measures we can take are going to way outperform having to fix a problem later. So if I can prevent this from happening, this whole thing, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, really applies very much to weeds, because once they go to seed, they're producing thousands of seeds, and we know that we're going to be in for trouble again the following year. So reducing the population through competition, which is the density, keeping the soil covered, minimizing disturbing, and then if you have to, doing a little bit of weeding by hand works. But we get behind on all this for 1,000,001 different reasons. Weeds get out of control, and oftentimes the only practical resolution this is going to be in the chemical treatment. So that's what I'm talking about here in the next few minutes. And then I'm going to take some questions because I want to sort all this part out before we move into the fertilizing. So if I'm trying to give you weed control recommendations, we're getting a lot of, it's kind of complicated, but this is why actually I enjoy it, because it's sort of because it is challenging. And it begins with being able to identify the weed because I want to know exactly which weed I'm dealing with so I'm better informed on how I can go about managing this. Because if I'm going to be applying an herbicide, something that kills the weed, I can do something that prevents the seed, the pre-emergent, that can block that preventative, like I said, which is always going to be my preferred option. Or if that opportunity for prevention is passed, now I'm in what we call a post-emergent, but these are the weed killers. So there's a pre-emergent, prior to the emergence, preventative, post-emergence, after the weeds are there actively growing. And we're also looking at herbicides. Is that going to be selective? So in this case, I want something that's going to kill chickweed, henbit, bittercress, dead nettle, but not kill my grass. So that's I'm selectively trying to kill the broadleaf weeds without injuring my turf. There are also non-selective herbicides that kill everything. So that would be an example that kills both the weeds and the grass that's in there. So now I'm hitting you with a lot of this different terminology, but I'll show you examples so it all starts to make sense. And then there's also, we're going to look at, am I doing this as a granular or a spray application? I mean, know what the surrounding stuff is. So that's where whenever I get emails from you about weed control, I'm usually trying to get a total picture in there, identifying what's there, what's around me, and then I can give you better options to go to this. So a weed preventer, this is usually a granular product that is applied because we're actually applying and treating the soil. We are not treating the plants per se. I'm not treating the grass. I'm trying to treat the soil. So we would put these little granules down, and as they get watered in, it initiates and forms a chemical barrier on the surface of the ground. And what will happen is if a seed lands there, and it begins to germinate and that little root tip hits that chemical barrier, it prevents that from getting established. So again, this has to be done before any of those seeds germinate and the weeds start dying. And the timing on this becomes very important also that we'll see. So you're out looking around your lawn and you're seeing the bittercress and the chickweed starting to show up. What you don't see is crabgrass and stiltgrass, right? The crabgrass and stiltgrass, that begins showing up later. That begins showing up in May, June, July, August, right? These are summer weeds, so they're also annuals. And what I'm telling you is that grass, these seeds are sitting in the soil. What they're going to do though is as that soil temperature begins to warm up, all that seed is going to begin to sprout, and then you'll see them show up later. So just like you're seeing the winter annuals now, we're at this transition point where the summer annuals are going to begin growing. But you can easily take steps at this time of year to prevent that from happening. So my point is that what I'll call prime time for getting a weed preventer down is roughly from about March 15 to April 15. It's not an exact date, but somewhere in there is usually a good window of opportunity to try to get your weed preventer down so that we don't see things like crabgrass and stiltgrass later in the season. So as you're coming in, this is something that I'm prioritizing, saying that pretty much everybody needs to do, or a little bit of a sense of urgency, because to get our best results, we want to do this now, this time of year, so that we don't get into those problems later. Now, we probably sell 10 different products or close to 10 different products will do this job. This particular one that I'm showing, the Preen crabgrass control, it's an excellent option. It's definitely a good one. But what happens, so I'm showing this because this is just the straight up weed preventer. There's no fertilizer mixed in there. There's no weed killer. It's just a weed preventer. Depending on what your circumstances are and what your objectives are, you can buy this mixed with a fertilizer. You can buy it mixed with a weed killer. You can get a fertilizer, weed preventer, weed killer. You can get all different combinations of this. So the bags might change, look different. But again, our staff are going to guide you through all this when you start to come in. So that preen I sum out, that works really well on crabgrass and about 40 other weeds. What it does not do is it gives us uh, results on several, but not the complete range of broadleaf weeds. So for example, I'm showing you this one, this gallery. This product works sort of the same mode of action, granular. You put it down at this time of year, it forms chemical barrier, all that is the same. But this one is targeting specifically broadleaf weeds. So depending on what you're trying to control, manage one or the other, or some people, both products work to serve their goals, objectives, and history that's in there. So again, if you're not familiar with it, this stuff can be a little overwhelming, but that's why I invite you to come in and talk this through it. I'm going to show you a couple other choices just to add to your shopping list or your options that exist out there. A lot of people, for very good reasons, don't want to be putting chemicals out in the environment. They don't want to be using the herbicides. They just don't want to be doing this, whether it's the time, the money, the effort, the use of the chemicals, whatever. I mean, we respect all of those different options that are there. Corn gluten meal is an organic option. It's developed at Iowa State University, so has university science to support it. It's a 100% natural organic alternative that's out there. I'm just going to tell you it's not one that I personally promote a lot of times. Again, these are based on your priorities, not mine. But what I find is it is less effective and more costly than some of the conventional options that are out there. So these are choices you are going to make based on your priorities. And again, we're going to be there and we offer all these different things. So it's not like one or the other. They're just options that you have. One more product can show, and then I promise you we're going to start to get away from this stuff. I say that because I know it's just, it looks like a lot of bags. And I'm telling you, you can use one, the other, or in combination with each other. All these different weed controls I showed you, they don't play nice with seeding. You're usually faced with a choice. Are you going to seed or are you going to treat the weeds? It's one or the other. So sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where it's like, well, I want both. I have bare spots and areas that I absolutely need to seed because they're thin and worn out. And you just told me I can't leave the soil bare. So yes, I need to seed, but also I have a history of weed problems and I want to get ahead of that and stop it from happening. This is a specialty product. It's a starter fertilizer with a weed preventer, and we can use it at the same time as seeding. There are very, very, very few products that allow you to do both. This is one of the only ones that will allow you to do both. It also, just to make it more confusing, it's put in about 2 different packages under 2 different names. Scott's shows it as step 1 for seeding. They also sell it as triple action for seeding. But that's where we'll talk to you and make sure you get the right product. But if you're in that situation where you want to do the seeding, you want to prevent weeds, I just want to let you know it can be done. We just got to get the right option to you. So everything I showed you before, those are weed preventers. So if I have annual weeds, if I have things like bittercress, henbit, the chickweed, the stuff that's showing up today, I could put a preventer down for that, let's say in late August or September. If I want to stop crabgrass and stiltgrass and spurge and lespedeza, that I want to do now in the spring, between like March 15, April 15, roughly speaking. But what if I have perennial weeds? And this is, I'm using the violet as an example because these are not exact definitions. You are setting your goals and your expectations of what you want to do in terms of lawn quality and what's annoying you, what's not, what you want to get rid of, what you want to keep. Those are your choices to make. We're just kind of here to help guide you whichever direction you want. So, as example, as beautiful as the native violets are, and they are gorgeous, and I'll have these lovely flowers here in probably a few more weeks. It's a really tough, persistent, hard to control weed, if you want to call it that, because it does form these beautiful purple flowers. It also produces down in the crown of the plant, down at the ground level, what we call a cleistogamous flower. These are self-pollinating flowers. They never open up. It's not a bud that's going to open up into a beautiful flower. This is like this secondary thing. If these beautiful, pretty purple flowers, if they fail to get pollinated, if they fail to fertilize and produce seeds, I've got a backup plan. I can produce seeds down these cleistogamous flowers. And if that's not enough, what we're looking at here, those seeds have this little they have this little appendage on it, what's called an elaiosome, that has this little package of fatty acids in there. And that's there as a food source for insects. So what you're looking at here are ants that are going in because they're attracted to that little food source that's on the seed, but then they're going to drag that seed back off to their nest where they take it in the ground, basically planting the seed for you. So it's an amazing plant. The biology of it, I think, is just phenomenal. This is one of the reasons I love to promote it. But if you think you're going to get rid of it from your garden, it's going to be something that requires a lot of persistence because this is a perennial. It doesn't die during the winter, it just goes dormant. And that rhizome gets thicker and stronger and more resilient with each passing year. So if you are dealing with these, like dandelions and violets, these are going to require more commitment to manage them, get rid of them. And that's usually what we're talking about a post-emergent when we're going out and using a selective post-emergent weed killer. So it's selectively killing the weeds without injuring the grass. And those products are going to come with names such as, you know, Speed Zone, showing off Trimex Speed. There's chickweed clover oxalis. There's again like a dozen different products that I don't want to go into right now. We'd rather talk to you in the store about that. All right, I'm going to take a super quick little, well, I'm not a break, but a question break. I want to see if you guys have any questions regarding the seeding, some general lawn stuff, weeds, and once we get that answered, we'll go in and talk a little bit about fertilizers before we wrap things up.
All right, thanks, David. We do have some questions, so I'll start sharing. The first one is, so is it good to aerate before seeding?
Yes. So when you talk about aeration, there's a core aeration. That's a machine that goes around and punches holes, pulls little plugs, cores out of the ground. It's doing so many good things for us. It is trying to alleviate compaction in the soil, mixing of the soil. One of the things that's nice too is because now that turf canopy is open, there's some exposed soil. So that seed contact, that soil seed contact is enhanced. So yeah, I would love to say the deluxe plan is to aerate, seed, and top dress all at the same time.
Okay, okay. All right, I'll start with our seeding and weed related questions, and then we can move on to some others. And we may take those towards the end. Do you need compost cover if using Easy Seed product?
No,
Easy Seed.
so most of the easy seed comes with some type of mulch cover. So when I say mulch, this is just some type of organic material that helps cover the seed, protect it, keep it moist, enhance the germination. A lot of the easy seed products come with sort of a paper fiber mulch to serve that purpose. So no, you wouldn't need to. That's like the seed, the mulch, all that combined is what I think you're talking about.
Okay. Next question. Should you apply pre-emergent as a preventative measure on a certain schedule, like once every season, or should you apply it just as you see the weeds emerging?
So you actually want to apply a pre-emergent before the weeds start to emerge again, because this has to stop it before that seed actually gets rooted in there. That's why I'm saying kind of a predictive model is quite technically it is based on soil temperatures, but for us in our region, usually this like March 15, April 15 is a good range. If we get a little bit late, we can go into the end of April, we can go into May. Some people have already started early in there. So somewhere in that window, but right around the March 15, April 15 is a good time to prevent the summer weeds. Now, what's going to happen, depending on the product that you use, Some of these products last 30 days, some of them last 120 days, but most of them do require a follow-up application. There's a lot of misleading information or on the advertising, so you can look at a bag that says lasts all season. For us here in the Mid-Atlantic region, though, we have a long growing season. We tend to have wet weather in spring, and because of the wetness and the length of our growing season, they don't last all season. So again, a kind of a roundabout answer to your question. Oftentimes you come in, we'll be telling you, oh yeah, let's go ahead and put this pre-emergent down, and then 6 to 8 weeks later, I want you to do a second application or something like that. So yes, you do need to follow a scheduled application, but that's going to vary depending on the product, but you do want to get started now.
Okay. Next question. My neighbor's zoysia seems to be migrating into my yard. It is a prettier grass, except now when it's brown. Do I overseed it with fescue?
So that's a little bit of a challenge. So zoysia is an example we talked about early in the program. That's a warm season grass. So it goes dormant. As you can see, that's why it's got sort of the straw color to it. It loves the heat. So it doesn't really start growing strongly almost until about June in our climate, because when it begins to stay in the 70s, approaching 80, that's when it starts to wake up and start growing. When we get 80, 90, 100 degrees, it's thriving. So zoysia, it's a lower input grass, less water, less fertilizer, less weed competition because of its density that's in there. So it's a low input grass, but it does go dormant in the winter time. And one of the things we run into is like you're describing, it creeps and it spreads slowly. And so it's migrating from one lawn into the other. I don't recommend overseeding because it is so dense and so tight. It's going to outcompete trying to overseed it. What you really need to think about is, do I allow that zoysia grass to continue to creep in and gradually overtake my cool season grass? Or if, and that's fine if you like it, if you don't like it, then you need to get kind of aggressive with a example, this one back saying a non-selective, something that kills everything. You need to sort of kill that zoysia and periodically do things to try to keep it from expanding into the yard. That's something, if you're going to try to do a weed killer on it, you need to wait until it starts to warm up till it's growing. So that would be like a June, July project. Or you go out and hand dig it now and then restore that area with a cool season grass. So there's a lot to think about on that. And if you, again, I keep saying, because I'd love to talk to you in detail, but we need to have that conversation in person.
Okay. Next question. Are you aware of any safety issues for pets with any of the weed control products?
So all of these are pesticides, so they all have risks associated with it, and all of those safety guidelines are written on there. In a general sense of the word, everything I have talked about today and 90% of what we would have in the garden center and any retail center has what they call a caution warning. When you look at a pesticide, you probably can't see this, but but down here at the bottom in big bold letters, it says caution. Caution is the lowest toxicity. It goes caution, warning, danger, poison. So everything we're in is in a very low risk category to start with. So if I was spraying something like this, my advice would be, hey, keep dogs, pets, children, stay off the lawn area while you're spraying. Don't go back into that area until everything is completely dried. After it's completely dried, then you should be able to re-enter that area. So again, my kind of background and training, there is no such thing as a safe pesticide. It's all sort of a matter of risk, but I will tell you, these are all in the very low, minimal risk category. If I was doing the weed preventer, I'd apply that, water it in, stay off that lawn area until everything is dry completely. That way I'm moving the product down into the soil to very much reduce your risk of exposure to it. And based on your own personal choices, if you just really don't want to go like with any of these conventional things, the corn gluten is an organic product that is actually exempt from these regulations because it's a food grade material. It is already commonly used, a common ingredient in pet foods. And my greatest risk with the corn gluten is if you have dogs, they run around, they try to lick it up and eat it up off of the ground. Not that there's anything harmful with that, but you might see that, hey, now they've got this other habit where they want to go out in the grass. So you still want to water it in and take some of those precautions.
Okay. Should you seed before a spring snowstorm, or is that an old wives' tale?
So that's a practice that's called dormant seeding. It's not an old wives' tale. Um, but as I said, the germination is both temperature and moisture. So if I'm seeding during a snowstorm or afterwards, or before, the whole idea is, hey, that melting snow is working that seed down into the surface soil. It's providing moisture, slow soaking type watering. But understand that grass seed will sit there and it's not going to grow until our soil temperatures start getting close to 60 degrees. So if I went out and I put grass seed down in February, it's still going to sit there until April. If I put grass seed down today, it's going to sit there until April. So it's not an old wives' tale. I think people do this with good success, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make a lot of difference whether I seed it in January, February, or March. It all starts growing in April.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we have two more questions. Should you separate seeding and preen application is the first.
Absolutely. If you put down a weed preventer, we're saying the preen, that product I was showing, that has, I think, an 8 or 10 week wait time before you can seeding. So the same stuff that blocks the weed seeds from growing stops the grass from growing. So you cannot do these together. They're exclusive. The one exception is that Scott's product, and it will say Scott's for seeding. It very much clear when it says for seeding, because that's kind of unique chemistry that they have the license on. And so if you want to do both, you want to look for that particular product.
Okay. All right, last question for now. Does diatomaceous earth kill weeds or grubs?
Uh, Weeds or grubs, did you say?
Yes.
It's in my opinion, experience is pretty ineffective on both. Diatomaceous earth, it's an antidesicant. My sort of resistance to it, or say why I'm not as too excited about it, is when it gets wet, it's pretty much rendered useless. So even a heavy morning dew, a snow, a rain, or something like that renders it ineffective. Where I think it has better applications is going to be on indoor pests, like if you have kitchen pests and you want to use that, as we call it, crack and crevice treatment. It's swept in pantry areas or something for ants or roaches or something like that. Inside the house in a dry environment, I think it has applications. Outdoors for slug control or grubs or weeds, I don't have. It's not something I would recommend.
Okay.
All right, are we going back to slides?
Yep, that's all the questions for now. So good to go back to slides.
Hey, because I want to talk to you guys quickly about fertilizer. So I always say fertilizer, you've heard me say 1,000 times, it's like vitamins, right? There's certain, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, there's nutrients that our bodies need, but it doesn't produce. So we have to get that from the food that we consume or eat. So plants, the things that they need to grow and reproduce, they have to get these minerals out the soil. So these are our plant essential nutrients list here. There's about 17, 18, depending a little bit how you define nickel or silicon and stuff. We're still studying and looking at all this stuff. These are the nutrients that the plants need to live and grow. When I say macronutrient, secondary nutrients, micronutrients, This is the volume that they need, the quantity that they need. So they might need only a minuscule amount of nickel, but they need a pretty good amount of phosphorus, as an example. So when we're talking about fertilizers, we're providing these nutrients. It's analogous to me of taking a vitamin pill to make sure that you're getting the nutrients to maximize the health and growth of the plant. So most fertilizers are going to contain these three macronutrients. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are three of the nutrients that the plants need, the plant essential nutrients that it needs in larger quantity. So again, I'm not feeding the plant, I'm fertilizing, I'm putting nutrients out there to optimize the growth of the plant. So in the ideal world, let's say maybe you would go to a doctor and even have like a blood test. They might run an evaluation and give you a vitamin recommendation based on the specifics of your health and your condition. The same way with our gardens, we would take a soil sample, send it off to the lab. They would run an analysis on the chemistry of the soil, the pH, the nutrient contents, and come back and give you a specific recommendation. So that's all well and good and highly recommended. But the reality of it is many times, hey, we're busy, we're not taking whether it's the time, the inconvenience, the expense, whatever. So just like some people might say, well, I'm just going to take a multivitamin. I don't really know if I'm getting a balanced diet. I don't know if I'm getting all the minerals that I need, but I'm going to take a multivitamin, just kind of check that box and see that it works for me. So that's a little bit the same way we do with fertilizers in our garden. We can take a soil sample, we can get this measurements that it tells us exactly what's going on, and then customize recommendations for you, or we just kind of take sort of the generic, let me just add the nutrients to make sure it's there and try to get the best out of my lawn and garden that's there. So there's a couple things that you will see on that. In this example, the first thing I look at, if I have a soil test or if you've done an evaluation, the very first thing we're going to look at on there is right here. See where your soil pH is. In this particular soil sample, the soil pH is 7.9. The significance of that is if you look at a pH scale, right here in the middle, see where it says 7.0? 7.0 is neutral. My soil test was telling me I'm at 7.9. I'm up here at about 8. And my ideal optimum range is somewhere between 6 and 6.5. So the relevance of that is 7 is neutral. My soil here is testing at 8, and I want to be down here in this closer to 6.5 point range. What these different pretty little graphs are showing is the influence of the pH on the availability of these different nutrients. So if I look at phosphorus, again, that plant essential nutrient, as my pH starts to go up, see this one where that pH is starting to reach about 8, so that soil sample's up here, this line gets smaller and it tapers off, and that's telling me the phosphorus is less available. The phosphorus could be in the soil, but as the pH increases, the plant's less able to absorb it. If I go too low, I start going down here, 5.5, and down to the 5s and the 4s. The same thing happens. If my pH goes to a low extreme, the plant's not able to absorb this phosphorus. So that's why it's so important that we check the pH, we monitor that, because we're trying to keep it in this kind of sweet spot where all the minerals and the nutrients that your plants need to thrive are readily available to them. So for lawns want to be somewhere between 6.2 and 6.7, 6.8. So right here, about 6.5 is kind of the sweet spot for lawns. Now we can move this. We can change the pH up or down based on what's needed. So a lot of times you'll hear people applying lime. Lime will elevate the pH if it's acidic. If I'm at a alkaline pH, I would apply sulfur to make that a little bit lower. So this is some of the advantage of doing a soil analysis. It allows us to optimize the nutrition. Now, again, the plants are really adaptable. They'll grow in less than ideal conditions. This isn't exactly life or death, but this is trying to really optimize and get the best that we have out of it. So on this soil test, when we start talking about the nutrition, to me, it's number one, I want to make sure that my pH, or I really want to try to keep my pH in the ideal range. The secondly is we can supplement the natural nutrition of the soil, and this is what the fertilizers, or what we frequently call plant food, in this case, lawn food. So this bag, you can see Merrifield Premium. This is 26% nitrogen. That was the number one of our plant essential nutrients, our macronutrients. This is 0% phosphate. That was the second of our macronutrients. And what's happened is the soils in our region are naturally high in phosphate. There's probably a 75% chance at least that your soil, with doing nothing, has phosphorus in it. So we don't add additional phosphorus. We don't supplement that unless I really have a soil test that is telling me there's a deficiency or some specific reason that I want to add that phosphate. Again, these are kind of generic recommendations. The third macronutrient there, the potassium, that's what this 12% number is. So we have formulated fertilizers that have the balance of these nutrients based on sort of the local growing conditions, the general local soils that are there. If you were to do a soil test, that could change the equation that's in there. But generally, this is a good time of year to think about putting these additional nutrients, because you saw in my chart out with during this cool weather spring, we hit a period of growth, and there's also growth and some root development. And so it can be a good time to fertilize your lawn. So contrary to what I just showing you there, the Merrifield Select, this one has phosphorus in there, right? If you remember how I was telling you, hey, our soils generally have sufficient phosphate. We generally don't apply additional phosphate. One of the exceptions is, though, if you're seeding, if you're a young seedling grass plant with a lot of cell division going on and you're actively trying to get roots established, then we know at that point in time, the plants, actually the seeds and young seedlings, actually benefit from the additional phosphate that's on there. So this is why we have really these two different formulations. One would be if I'm seeding, and one would be if I'm not seeding, right? And then this is sort of a schedule that you would look at. This is an annual schedule. So where I have this low, medium, high range, these are based on your expectations, right? This is not really a question of lawn health. It's really more of lawn expectations. So if you are looking, let's say, for a minimum input lawn, maybe I just fertilize it once in October, put down that bag of Merrifield Premium, and I call it good. If let's say I'm going to go to the high range by way of contrast. I really take a lot of pride and enjoyment in this, and I'm happy to put the effort into it. Then at that point, maybe I'm going to fertilize in September. I'm going to fertilize again in October, again in November, and then again here in this springtime period. I'm saying ideally kind of May 15 to June 15. If you're kind of a middle of the road person, hey, we try and get you fertilized twice in the fall and then once in spring. So when I talk about spring application, just like we were talking about the weed preventers, it's not that there is an exact date. There's kind of a window of opportunity that might open even on March 15 and closes on June 15. Within that window of application of opportunity, I'm saying that this May 15, June 15 to me is the ideal time to be fertilizing your lawn, but some people want to get an early start on it and are doing that now, and that's absolutely fine. So again, all these things are compatible. You can do the fertilizing, at the same time as seeding, do the fertilizing at the same time as the weed prevention. Um, you theoretically could do fertilizing, weed prevention, and seeding. All these things work together. We just have to make sure that you get the right product for it. And there's no absolute answer. It really depends what your goals, your objectives are. Now, I've mentioned earlier that grass just doesn't grow in shade. Moss is like a primitive plant. It doesn't really have a root system. So if I've just got compacted ground, it's moist, it's shady, moss will grow in these environments. And I'm saying I love moss. I would call this a plus of, and I try to encourage it in my garden. Some people don't like it, and we also encounter that in spring. And if it gets that situation, there are moss killers can do that we could use, but we'll have that conversation another day. So we're there. We're spring. It's just beginning. I've got a few minutes left. I put a lot of stuff on the table. Let's see if we have any questions.
All right, we have not had any questions come in for this final round. So, everybody, I'll just go over a few things. If any questions come in, we'll take those. If not, we are done for the day. For anybody who needs to access the recording, just be aware you can find it on our YouTube channel tomorrow. If you need help finding that, feel free to send me an email. I can send you the link. And I think that's about it. Dan, David, oh, we've had some come in.
I
Um, what do you think of dwarf mondo grass as a lawn substitute?
I love dwarf mono grass. I use it in my own garden. So the nice things with dwarf mondo grass is it's actually an asparagus family. It's not a grass, but it's a slow, low creeping ground cover that looks like grass. So it can fill that same purpose, the same function. It's not as wear tolerant. One of the wonderful things about lawns is you can walk on a lawn. It tolerates traffic a little better. The dwarf mondo grass, you can do casual walking on there. I mean, I walk on mine, but it might be 2, 3 times a week, not 2, 3 times a day. But absolutely shade tolerant, low maintenance, and it serves the same functions.
Okay. Next question. Do you recommend a winterizer fertilizer in the fall months?
So the winterizer, I think, is a little bit of a marketing name of our, let's say, again, for the fall, our window opens maybe on September 1 and it basically closes on December 1. So I don't want you fertilizing the lawns any later than December 1. So winterizer to me would be like a November application. And so yes, fertilizing that September, October, November time period, 100%. That's when you get the most benefit from it. That's when the root growth is taking place. And like I said, so that's the time of year we really want to be doing our seeding and our fertilizing. Our establishment work happens in fall, and then we'll get better results if we focus on weed management in spring.
Okay. Okay. I just accidentally muted myself. Next question. Most of my lawn is more mud than grass. Should I start with seed?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying. You really can't allow just mud to stay there. So you need to seed the lawn. The tough part is the realization is you can seed your lawn. It will start in May or in April. It will look nice in May. It might carry into June, but some point in time, like we get really hot when we start hitting 95 and 100, 105, which inevitably happens here. Your grass is just gonna fade out. Even if you're good with watering, it just can't take the heat. And so you'll have to come back and reestablish it in September. That's just the realities, what you're faced with. Another way around that is if it's not a large area, you can put sod down. In sod, you're buying grass that's already a year old, so it establishes much quicker, kind of instant results, but at a higher cost. But if that fits your budget, sod could be a really good solution for you.
Okay. This is our last question. Any recommendations for weed control that doesn't kill grass?
So it depends more to me on the type of weed that you're managing. Some of the better ones, I would say, and there's a lot of good choices out there, but two that I brought in to show you. Speed Zone. This is like a commercial strength weed killer. It's a concentrate. You have to mix it with water. Does like 20,000 square feet. So it only works if you have big lawns and you're willing to do the spray. Same company, Gordon's, makes this in a retail version that they call Trimex Speed. But if you want just a little small squirt bottle, a lot of times I might show you one that's called Weed Beater Ultra. So there's a lot of different brands out there. We carry a lot of them. We will show you one that's appropriate to what your circumstances is, whether you want a little trigger spray or a concentrate, the size of your lawn, the type of the weeds. So I'm showing you these as suggestions, but don't ever get locked in like that's your only choice. There's many others.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, David. That's all of our questions for now. So do you have anything you'd like to wrap up with before we
Well,
close?
I'm going to do my lawn care seminar on Saturday here at
That's right.
Fairlawn at 10 o'clock. It's going to be the same slides. It just gives me an opportunity to go into more detail. We get to exchange because we're seeing each other in person. So if you want to come by, please do. I think you'll get just more detail, same kind of material. Um, Hey, if not, have a great weekend. Come and see me at the store, visit the plant clinic. Because like I said, we really take a lot of, it's not just pride, it's what you deserve and what you need. It's like individual attention. We don't even sell these four-step programs. That's just like marketing nonsense. We're here really kind of to find out what works best for you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Yeah, everybody, please feel free. That's at the Fair Oaks store at 10 a.m. on Saturday for anybody who wants to go see David in person. David, thank you so much. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, David.
Bye.